to have you here on what amounts to a gorgeous day outside. And I hope any and all of you can enjoy the very spring-like weather after the kind of disastrous 2 weeks of hard winter that we had. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones to today's presidential research series. For those of you that don't know her, Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones is an associate professor in our Department of Human Relations. She's going to join us today to discuss her research and experience around supporting students during the current pandemic. So very topical and timely research. Dr. Lloyd-Jones received her doctorate in educational administration and research from the University of Tulsa. Her primary research and publications focus on representation and experiences of women in color in senior ranks of faculty and administrative leadership. She has extensive experience working with graduate students who have obtained doctorates and received research and teaching awards under her mentorship. And I know she's been a longtime mentor to many students who, in a previous conversation, she related to me that students she mentored a long time ago find her again years later, and it's a very moving and impactful. She is the recipient of both the President's Leadership Award from OU Tulsa and the Paragon Award for Community Leadership from Leadership Tulsa. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones for her talk today on how students handled things, have been handling things during the pandemic. Dr. Lloyd-Jones, thank you.
Thank you. Slowing the Spread, a poem. Distance learning, remotely earning, physical distance at experts' insistence, an unfamiliar existence, a result of COVID's persistence. The coronavirus has struck a nerve, fighting back to flatten the curve through social distancing and spreading the word. I am not a poet, nor do I write poems, but I begin this presentation with this poem to convey a kind of impact that the current pandemic has had on me, influencing me to engage in activities that tend to be new and different for me. The composition and recitation of this poem reflect a palpable impression that COVID-19 has made and sets the stage for the presentation of my study. I came to this work after receiving an email from the university administration in March of 2020. That was spring break or during the spring semester. And the correspondence stated that faculty members were to shift all in-person classes taught on campus to online virtual instruction as a result of social distancing measures. Soon after, I began to receive emails and telephone calls from my students who had also received a notice about the transition from in-person class to synchronous online learning. My graduate students are typically non-traditional students who work full-time and have families for which they are responsible. Many of them voiced concern about the pivot, namely because the course had started as an in-person class on campus, and one of the students asserted, and I quote, "Had I desired to participate in distance learning, I would not have enrolled in a face-to-face class." Another student shared with pride, and I quote, "Until now, I have taken all of my classes in person with professors on campus." And she added, "I am not looking forward to online learning with Zoom." So the collective hesitancy in shifting to synchronous online instruction was the impetus for this study. So in the study, I explore my own transition from teaching in person in the classroom and on campus to engaging in remote synchronous online instruction due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I described the specific skills I developed to create optimal learning settings for students and minimize attrition and feelings of isolation. So here's the overview of today's presentation. I know I have some of my students on today, those of whom I serve on their dissertation committees and or thesis committees. So I will provide some detail just briefly and move through it. But the presentation overview will include a problem statement, the research question for this particular study, the methodology, data collection and analysis, finding and discussions, implications and conclusions, and you won't want to miss it, a spoken word performance at the end. So let's look at the problem statement. The COVID-19 pandemic required many higher education faculty members to transition quickly from in-person classroom instruction to virtual online learning, making it essential to understand how to work professionally within the new norm. So I certainly have experience with teaching online. However, I had not taught online with a video conferencing application such as Zoom. And so there was a bit of trepidation for me too, because I knew I would there would be a learning curve that I needed to learn quickly. I could imagine the students' hesitancy because many of them had not used Zoom or Skype. And some of them, as I share with you in the quote, had not even taken a class online. So this was the concern. So here's my research question that guided the study. How does a faculty member transition students from traditional classroom instruction to synchronous online learning while maintaining an uninterrupted learning environment and continuity in relationships given social distancing measures due to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic? So again, we had already began to meet in class and we established rapport and we were talking effortlessly and certainly getting along in a very positive way. And so I didn't want to lose that sense of rapport and sense of belonging. And I worked hard and thought a lot about how can I continue the positive interaction that we've established at the initial class time or class period. So that's the research question. Now this study has, I think, great significance in that it addresses a gap in the research literature concerning higher education faculty's experiences of pivoting to synchronous online teaching during the COVID-19 crisis from a faculty's perspective. And because it's so new, the pandemic, well, it's been a year now, but I am drawing from a recently published article regarding COVID-19 and faculty members' quick pivot to online teaching. And so although I've seen some students talk about their experience and publish their experience in journals, I have not seen many, or there's been limited number of faculty members who have done or who have published their perspectives and their lived experience. So here, there are theories that inform this study. Namely, the main one is social support theory. And social support theory refers to any process by which relationships might enhance health and well-being. There's 3 primary emotional support behaviors. And these are the 3 that I will focus on in my study. So emotional support really refers to the messages communicated to convey empathy, to convey concern. And it may sound like words of encouragement when individuals feel alone or feel anxious. Instrumental support refers to assistance given to others that is tangible. And that could look like taking groceries to someone who is quarantining, for example, or providing transportation to someone who needs to visit the doctor or attend a medical appointment. And then there's informational support. And that is the notion of messages that help people access resources or opportunities. And that may look like an email providing information about funds for individuals who may be experiencing financial concerns, or it could be the contact information for a local food bank. And so those are the three types of social support that informed this particular study. I also draw on the human relations approach, and that is part of my, this certainly is my article that was published in 2020 in terms of developing competencies for emotional, instrumental, and informational student support. So the human relations approach is concerned with building relationships across multiple contexts and preventing social support breakdown during changing social and human events. And this was my aim, certainly with the pivot to online teaching. Human relations links with this study because with the COVID-19 pandemic, rules of engagement have changed. And I often think about songs as metaphors. And I think of the popular song by Sting. It's an oldie, but goodie. And he would sing, "Don't Stand So Close to Me." You may remember that song. That is certainly emblematic of what we are asked to do in terms of at least 6 feet apart, to watch our distance, as opposed to pre-COVID when Diana Ross, we know that icon, and the Supremes, they sung "Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand. Make this world a better place if you can." We avoid touching one another unless we live with the person. And so that is certainly, I think, useful. These are useful metaphors to think about how the rules of interaction, human interaction, have changed. The methodology I use is autoethnography. And I used it because it is a great way to strengthen our understanding of the transition to synchronous online instruction. Briefly, autoethnography is a qualitative method of research that allows the researcher to incorporate one's professional and personal identities in order to share an aspect of their lived experiences. So, who's involved in the study? It is me, myself, and I. The study involved one faculty member, that's me. So with autoethnography, I am the researcher and the participant. And I am exploring my positionality within the academic culture because we are interested in understanding the culture in which I navigate. And so as the course instructor, I'm responsible for shifting students from a traditional classroom to a virtual one. In this particular class, I had 25 graduate students. Again, they're predominantly non-traditional students, and the age ranged from 25 to 75 years old. Now, I gathered the data for this study starting in March 12th specifically, through May 12th, 2020. Again, this is the spring semester, and this is following spring break. The data sources that I used to explore my lived experiences included audio recordings of my classes via Zoom, and then I transcribed them verbatim, and I accumulated over 100 pages of transcripts. And I also use email messages and letters, both from my own students and from administration. And I'll give some examples of that a little later. I use published studies on online and e-learning, as well as virtual instruction to gather information on what we already know about this type of learning. And I use constant comparison and coding procedures to analyze the data. And so I generated 3 major themes, and I'll talk about them as we move further. So in this section, I will discuss the findings to aid in our understanding of the analysis. I pair the findings of the study with relevant research during this part of my talk. So there are 3 competencies emerged from my experience transitioning to a virtual online teaching platform. Number 1 was coaching, 2, care, 3, collaboration. And these are skills essential to successful student learning outcomes. So I'll talk briefly about each of the 3. So I start with coaching. And coaching, in terms of a description or a definition, is an approach to equipping individuals with the tools, information, and opportunities they need to achieve goals, improve performance, and enhance personal satisfaction. And this is by Peterson, a publication in 1996. Scholars reiterate coaching is key to learners' success in virtual contexts where support is required for adult learners. And this is important, particularly for my study, because students were concerned about being successful. How could they be successful in a virtual space in which they were not accustomed to? How did they translate their assignments from in-person to online and do that successfully and achieve a good grade? These are high achieving students, and they want to get a good grade. And so that was part of the concern. So findings from my study suggest that coaching is comprised of instructional and emotional support, and often serves to give students emotional strength to rise to the occasion of learning in a new way in the face of adversity. So for example, it was in my class that I learned that one of the students' parents was in ICU and had fallen ill and was not doing well at all. This meant that my student not only needed to take care of his household, but also that of his parents. Consequently, he made an appointment to speak with me and was seriously considering stopping out and taking a break because he felt overloaded, as you could understand, as well as overwhelmed. And I know from the literature that if one stops out, particularly non-traditional adults, it's very difficult to recruit them again and get them to start again. So my goal was to talk him into staying in. And so we talked about extensions on some of his assignments, as well as finding a way in which he could possibly push back his oral presentation because he was first on the list. And we were able to do that, and he was able to stay, and he finished the course. No instructor wants to be the professor where a student throws up their hands and say, I quit. We don't want anyone to quit on our watch because we want all students to be successful and to attain their professional and academic goal. So as we looked at coaching, so now let's move to care. What can we find and learn about care? So here's a great description of care in the literature that I identified. Its care involves assistive and supportive acts toward others with evident needs to improve a human condition. So findings from the study suggest that care is an investment in students' well-being. And I came away with this because I decided to find ways to invest in students, not only their academic health, but also their emotional health, in addition to their instrumental and informational knowledge. So the study's finding indicates the importance of supporting the efforts of administrators, reiterating and reposting resources and opportunities such as access to counseling services and emergency financial information for students. And this is one particular area in which I invested quite a bit of time. So each time I would receive a letter or a notice from administration that, for example, about counseling services that were available to students, I would post it on my learning management system, Canvas, for students so that they would have easy access to it. So I had a resource page. And many of my students, they would say, oh, I don't know where, I don't know if I saw that, or so I didn't want any excuses. So I put it on Canvas for them. Also, there were letters or emails stating the availability of financial assistance. And I thought this was very useful because a couple of my students, their significant others were laid off. I know a couple of them shared they were having financial difficulties. I would put that information on Canvas. A nice piece too was the videos that administration would make. I would put those up as well. This, again, investing in students' well-being, making it easy and accessible, making information easy and accessible for students during this very difficult and unfamiliar, unprecedented time. So those just are some examples. I also took the lead from the administrator. There were several letters and emails from administration that actually included the word care. And I'll just read one. And this is from one of the emails from administration. Thank you for doing your part to protect the health of our campus communities. Your collective response and care toward each other and our students represents the very best of our university. And this was sent in March 2020. So that's an example of administration communicating the importance of care. So I am following administration's lead because administration, they have influence. From the letters, the recurrent theme of care, I it confirmed for me that it was a good thing for me to demonstrate care, not only for my fellow colleagues, but for the students. Collaboration, this is the third of the three. Collaboration, according to the literature, virtual collaboration in higher education has been described by many scholars as integral to the quality of learning and is very much related to coaching and the ethic of care. In this particular area, I want to share an example of collaboration in which I developed questions, pulling them from various sources, including journal articles and publications. I developed a check-in of sorts. And at the beginning of each of the class sessions, I would host a check-in. And some of the questions, just to give you an idea of them. For example, how are you doing? Or how has your day been? How are things going? And that's a prompt, and students, they can answer if they like, or they can remain silent and listen to others. Another question was, what has been going well or according to plan? What, if anything, has been a challenge or an annoyance for you? And what has been or is your way of handling that challenge? Is there anything that I, as an instructor, can do to help you? And finally, what sorts of information, actions, or resources might you need from others to help you achieve what you need? These were powerful times the check-ins, people felt as though it was a safe space for them to share what was going on. This is the time that I learned about the student who had a parent in ICU. This was a time also that I learned of someone's significant other losing employment. That person used the chat and communicated to me that she needed to exit the class because she needed to pay attention to her significant other, who held up a pink slip and was, as you can imagine, very upset about it. So the check-ins were very useful. This was also a time when I learned that my students are very resourceful. Many of them have jobs or are positions in health and human service agencies. So for example, someone, grandparents moved in with them and they wanted to know of a resource for the geriatric population. And one of my students knew right away, yes, Tulsa Senior Services, here's the information, I'll put it in the chat. They will be a great resource for your grandparents. And so again, now we are engaged in peer collaboration, peer-to-peer interaction. Because I learned some things, for example, about utilities and telehealth opportunities. And when I say utilities, funding for you to pay utilities. So these check-ins were, to say the least, hugely useful. And another way to collaborate, to make sure that students didn't feel left out or alone, or we could hopefully reduce some of the anxiety they were experiencing. So findings from this study regarding collaboration indicated that computer-mediated communication like Zoom wasn't enough to support collaboration. And that's why I offered students an array of different modalities to meet their needs, in the online course. And for example, IT support, I referred them to IT. I also put videos up that IT personnel sent me as an instructor. I put those on the resource page for students, video links, check-ins. Matter of fact, students asked for the questions from check-in to use in their employment and with family members. And also, whenever students wanted to meet via Zoom, I would meet with them. So again, we talked about coaching, we talked about care, we've talked about collaborations as competencies that I developed and learned to expand on in order to help the students make a smoother transition, well, some of them, as I mentioned, were nervous about it. And also my goal was to help them to persist in the class. So the summary of the discussion findings, and I again introduce or reintroduce my research question: how does a faculty member transition students from traditional classroom instruction to synchronous online learning while maintaining an uninterrupted learning environment and continuity in relationships given social distancing measures due to the onset of the COVID-19 crisis? And the response: through coaching students, demonstrating care for students, and collaborating with students while demonstrating social support behaviors. Again, the emotional, the instrumental, and the informational support behaviors are also present. So what are the implications for human relations? My account of human relations interactions with the students follow. When students received specialized attention, in other words, when I demonstrated coaching skills and I demonstrated care, I also demonstrated collaboration with the prompts, with the, for example, the sessions prior to class starting. They seem to experience a satisfying online existence. The trepidation was reduced, the anxiety was reduced, and they seem to get a sense of how to navigate the virtual space. When students were encouraged to participate, particularly in the check-ins, using social support behaviors, again, the emotional support behaviors in terms of conveying concern, empathy, as well as care, also the instrumental support in terms of providing, for example, the agency that would help with the geriatric population. Also, when we look at informational, and that's important too in terms of correspondence. Instrumental, the notion of actually giving help or making accessible the funds or the information about where to get funds to help during financial emergencies. When this was done, students verbalized feeling less lonely, less stressed, and less anxious. And so therefore the human relations notion of preventing social breakdown is in action here. Now, there are limitations, and I like to add possibilities with the study. Autoethnography, the nature of it, it's descriptive and therefore limited in its capacity for generalization. But it is my intention that You can utilize my narrative and framework to better understand and integrate interpersonal competencies and social support behaviors during times of unexpected challenges and change. And so here is just a conceptual framework that I'm working on and for supporting students during changing human events. And as you can see at the bottom, I have the social support behaviors because they serve as support. They undergird, they underpin the professional competencies. Again, the informational support, as I mentioned, making sure that students in this instance have access to resources and opportunities, emotional support, that students can understand that I am conveying as the instructor, as the professor, a sense of care, a sense of understanding, a sense of empathy, and then instrumental that I can actually provide tangible ways to assist them during this time of this adverse time. And then we have professional competencies at the top, coaching, again, care and collaboration, find the behaviors, the competencies that were found to be essential for students to experience persistence as well as consistency in the course. And then this is a human relations approach. It's about interacting in a new way, given the social distancing requirements and understanding how to navigate in this new terrain. So in conclusion, the study reveals the ways in which I was able to learn, grow, and meet the needs of students enrolled in the course I taught during the current pandemic, because we're still in it. As a result of this experience, I was able to master professional competencies required for student success while developing a range of social support behaviors. And I want to end with my spoken word. I started with a poem that reflected my sense of or the impact that COVID-19 seems to be having on me. And I am surprised sometimes at how I feel about this virus. And I cannot sometimes believe that we are going through it. And so I end with a spoken word. Again, I'm not a poet, I'm not a spoken word artist, and you can tell me that I probably should keep my day job. But I want to play it. It's only 1 minute and 27 seconds. And so here we go.
Yeah, we're not hearing the audio. Are you hearing the audio in your office?
Do you not hear it?
Uh-uh.
No?
No, yeah. The folks are writing in saying I can't hear the audio either. It started very faintly and then it went to 0. I couldn't hear it at all on the spoken word.
Okay. So what I will do, and maybe I'll just write to, maybe I'll just go right to YouTube in that way.
Yeah, you could do that. That's a good idea. Or if we can't make that work, we could send it out afterward to everyone who registered. But let's see if we can do it on YouTube. That's a good idea. And while we have this pause, I want to remind folks you're welcome to put questions for Dr. Lloyd-Jones in the chat or the Q&A feature as well. If you have questions about her research or thoughts or comments about whether autoethnography or support for students, support for faculty, support for staff, coaching, collaboration, other thoughts, it would be great to share and discuss.
Yeah, I think I might have it here.
If I'll give since we have a little time, I'll give a couple of announcements too related to research. One related to human relations, which is that OU Tulsa is again offering, we used to offer and sort of stopped for a while, but we're going to be offering the bachelor's degree completion in human relations. So if this work has piqued your interest, or someone in your family or friends or contacts in the community are interested in a bachelor's degree in human relations, of course, we've long offered the master's degree in human relations. The bachelor's is going to start up again next fall. And anyone interested can talk to Susan Looper, who is our recruiter for that program and undergraduate programs in general. And that's worth noting. You probably just saw a note from President Harris that due to the, we hope, continual waning of COVID spread and transmission and the availability of vaccine and increasing availability, we will be planning for in-person classes in fall using our regular spacing. So back into the classroom, still will be wearing masks, still will be recommending spacing, hand washing, etc. But that's a huge bit of good news that we'll be back in person in the fall. That is definitely subject to change, but that's the plan right now, and that was just announced. And last announcement is watch for more information about OU Tulsa Research Week, which is going to take place this year, April 5th through 9th, and you'll start to see lots of details. Here we go.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience. You got those announcements in. Would you like me to go now?
Yes, please.
All right. So here we go. Spoken word. Kindly remember to leave ample space, 6 feet apart in COVID's case. The key consistent message is to shelter in place. Home sweet home is our saving grace. Human interaction has quickly transitioned, requiring new behaviors and odd restrictions. Personal protection equipment is maximum. Wearing masks and gloves is premium. Washing hands for 20 seconds is minimum. Practice the current rules of engagement and become tomorrow's super change agent. Become tomorrow's super change agent. Are you muted?
Thank you. I was muted because I was, I said, nice beat. And where did you get the music for that? The track?
One of my, wherever it's free.
Okay. I think it's worth pointing out too that some of your slides you had pictures of students, and you did have an attribution which was small to see, but from Creative Commons, that you were using, permissible pictures. They were not our students and not done without consent. I think it's worth pointing out. So that was good. We have some excellent questions coming in. Thank you for your talk, and thank you for your research. I'm just going to go here for the Q&A. So we have a question asking, what are some tips on caring for your students without developing a possibly too friendly relationship, especially if you're a casual and warm person, which I would venture to say you are a warm person. So what level of relationship do you think is appropriate? And how do you, I guess, navigate that boundary of friendship or closeness or proximity when you're trying to be supportive, collaborative, caring, coaching, but not, risks, I guess, overstepping that boundary?
Yes, that's a great question. And my students have labeled me firm but fair. And I think that's the position that I take. And I guess I could add friendly. I got 3 F's there. I had 3 C's. I had firm, friendly, and fair. And so I'm very specific in terms of setting boundaries. I stick to the rules. Of course, if someone has found, if they've found themselves in a situation that warrants an extension, for example, an assignment, then I will consider everyone who has an extenuating circumstances. And I try not to play favorites, but I think you can have a fair and firm position and still be friendly, and keep your distance and make sure that you state your boundaries. I have not
Okay.
found it difficult to do that.
Thank you. Another question here is, considering the research that you've done on faculty experience navigating the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, are you anticipating new theories being developed around navigating instruction in a pandemic?
Excuse me, that is a great question. and I think if not developing new ones, it's building on ones that we have. For example, I'm looking at emotional intelligence, because I think that is a theory that I had not necessarily incorporated in my research or before, but I think that emotional intelligence, some researchers equated with IQ in terms of having an understanding and awareness, not only about yourself, but about other people. And so particularly when we, and I acknowledge those who have lost individuals due to COVID-19, America, we here in the USA, we are over 500,000 people lost to the pandemic. And people, I think, need to understand others who may react to grief and dying in particular ways, but find it difficult to let people know that I offer my condolences. Some people are uncomfortable with interpersonal skills, and I think that this is a time when we really need to use them. So I think certainly areas of interpersonal skills, emotional skills, we need to increase our understanding there. Also, in terms of new theories, perhaps this whole notion of hybrid instruction, something around that, because I think I wouldn't have had to work as hard if we had some pre-training, if we knew how to pair, if I knew how to pair the video conferencing platform with online teaching. But I taught online, but I didn't use Zoom or Skype. And so I think this notion of being prepared, perhaps continuing to have the option to teach using video conferencing, and thinking about theories around mediated communication, mediated interaction will be an area that it warrants, I think, additional investigation.
Another question that's come in that echoes something I wanted to ask, which is, Dr. Lloyd-Jones, what plans do you have to move your model forward? That is, now that you've completed this project, what plans do you have for the future, or publication, or dissemination? And the questioner goes on to say that the model you've proffered informs not only human relations, but human resource development, and would make a wonderful addition to that literature as well.
Yes, I plan to move it forward, and I agree. Human resources and human relations, I think they're first cousins. And the opportunity, human resources in that training and development is key in that area. The ongoing training, ongoing development, these are areas in which human relations can certainly undergird and support. So yes, I've submitted articles before to human resources types of journals, and developing and polishing the conceptual model will be the next item on my agenda.
So I was curious if you could share, and I think you touched on this, the motivation, which was essentially that you were, I don't know if inspired is the right word, or moved, but you took some administrative guidance or suggestions or offerings of recommendations, if you will, to as a faculty member to show compassion to all of us, to each other, but to your students especially. And so you sort of took that and you ran with it and formulated this study design. And I guess, was there more to the motivation than just the kind of instructions, if you will, from administration? So asking more of the, your own framework. And then secondly, since you've done this autoethnographic work and it has a very qualitative, descriptive flavor to it, I was wondering if you had given thought to a more quantitative analysis, like looking at, surveys, or looking at broader populations, whether they be of students or other fellow faculty members. So that was 2 questions, sorry.
So in terms of motivation, I think the major motivation was COVID-19. It just took me off guard. I could not believe we were walking around with masks, and we were actually distancing ourselves and staying away from one another. And for my students, who many of them enjoy the notion of coming together and meeting in the classroom as opposed to in the virtual space, they voice concerns as well. And I think it's very important to document these human events in ways in which are especially qualitative, because I want to hear the voices of others. I want to also better understand my lived experience and assess how I am doing or performing in terms of in the area of pedagogy. Am I teaching well, even though we have this adversity? And what are students? How are students learning? So the qualitative piece, I think, was very useful, and hopefully will inform a quantitative piece. So perhaps a mixed method would be the next step, adding a survey and asking questions, certainly starting with the ones that I asked during check-ins to understand what students are experiencing, and what I did notice is that some of the students had only taken online courses in my class. And so I'm also interested in the generational theory, perhaps, in how can we better understand the diversity within our classes based on digital pedagogy, based on online and learning, as well as face-to-face learning. What I'm also interested, for example, in what I liked about the synchronous space is that I met my students' significant others. I met their pets, and I had not up until now met their significant others or met other people within their household. So I think that is a nice piece, and it also offers an opportunity for family members to see what for example, their significant others are doing in class. And however, I have some students who find it annoying and who say that they can't speak freely because they have an audience, and some people like coming to class because that's their getaway time and that's their time away for just for them. So learning the various reasons and rationales, for example, that people enjoy in face-to-face classes and others enjoy the online space, would certainly do well with a survey in terms of quantitative research. So I think you're onto something.
Okay. Well, we're near the end of the hour, but there's a couple comments I'd like to share. First of all, there were just many, many comments saying that you did a great job and people are proud to be your colleague. They love it. Thanks for the information. So this was interesting. One commenter said, look at immediacy in the instructional literature. And I admit I'm not familiar with that concept. And the person says that their dissertation is about this or all over this, all about rapport and closeness. There is a positive correlation between immediacy and student learning. And so that is a thought. And I think that inspired another commenter to say, it's extremely hard for me to refrain from hugging and shaking hands. I've done well, but it was definitely a struggle. And so when you talk about things like collaboration, coaching, and caring, and somebody emphasized your human warmth. I guess, do you have any comments on that? I mean, you can't really reach through the screen. I mean, there are those emoticons and things like that allow us to clap or shake hands or imagine. Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not a hugger. So, yeah, I think we have to use our elbows when we can and use our ankles when we can. But I think we could use our words more to convey our sentiments. And that's what I want people to become more comfortable with. And you know what I really love? The chat feature. The chat feature is phenomenal. And sometimes I just collect them because I know I want to do some research with them. I just had a class last night, just very quickly, because I know we're time. And the support, we had two presentations, student presentation, and the support the students gave the other students through chat. I wonder if they would be verbal that way, but you're doing a great job. You set the bar so high. I can't believe I have to come after you. It was phenomenal. That chat feature, sometimes I say, are you listening to me or are you chatting over there? But then I look and they're talking about the lecture or they're making another comment. So I want to do some work with the chat feature.
Very good. Well, I want to thank our attendees. I most of all want to thank Dr. Brenda Lloyd-Jones for her work, her passion, her commitment, and her presentation today. And I also want to acknowledge and thank our Office of Marketing and Communications who helped put these events together and does it in such a nice and seamless way. And we are able
Absolutely.
indeed to enjoy it over virtual on the Zoom function, but hopefully it won't be too long before we'll be doing this again in person. But my thanks to all of you, really, and especially to you, Dr. Lloyd-Jones. Appreciate you.
May I thank you for the warm introduction and the great way that you facilitate the questions and listen so attentively. And I also want to thank Bonnie and Tracy and Tracy's team. Uh, they have been incredibly helpful and supportive throughout this process.
Very good. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.